So welcome everybody to the show. Next Week's Life is very, very happy to have Lisa and Wes McArtor, two very famous people in our industry. I think everybody knows them. Probably not much introduction. We all know what they've been doing the last 20, 30 years in our industry. So welcome, Wes. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I have a number of quick questions that I definitely want to be asking you about. And I think the industry is certainly curious about. So Wes, we're very proud of you as an industry. We all know some of the trials and tribulations you've gone through. So I want to get this one off the table pretty quick. How you feeling?
I'm actually doing pretty well. I got my last chemo treatment 1st of December, and as that slowly starts to vacate my body, I'm starting to feel better, a little stronger. Still got a little ways to go, but considering where the journey has been on, I'm doing pretty well.
Well, you look fabulous, and I'm sure everybody in the audience is going to be really happy to hear what you just said. So I was thinking about what we wanted to talk about on the podcast, and there's so many things, right, that we really want to talk about. But I was, you and I had pizza with Lisa and Mo the other day, and it was fun, and kind of brought me back to how we met and where we met. So what is your recollection of when and how we met, and how many years ago has that been?
Well, see, it had to have been 80, 89, 90, 91 in that area.
Probably before that, because we met in 88.
So I'm thinking it had to be around 88, 85, somewhere in there, right? Yeah. We were kids. We were definitely kids.
Yeah.
So for everybody that's listening in, Wes and I basically met at Minolta way, way, way back in the day. And we were really young bucks in the business. And Wes had a brilliant idea. And his partner at that time, Greg, also shared that idea. But it was about data. Now, who would have thought 40 years later, 35 years later, data is still the most popular thing and growing important thing in our business. So, Wes, when you left Minolta, and you and I had a conversation about this, the idea was so brilliant, you needed to strike out and do it on your own. So when you did that and you started your company, BEI, what were you thinking? Was this something that you saw lasting 20, 30 years?
Well, at the risk of bringing back some nightmares for some of the Minolta dealers, this was all the genesis out of one machine, the 8600.
Oh my God.
That was Minolta's first foray into the 60 page per minute arena. And that machine had a defect that just killed the dealers. We called it drum scumming because there would be an area of the drum that wouldn't take a charge. And so the image would be filming, it could be blurry, kind of out of focus. And you couldn't fix it. And so we were complaining, obviously, to Japan, going, this is killing us, because once we go out there, we spend an inordinate amount of hours trying to get it fixed, and it wouldn't stay fixed. And their response was, well, if you could statistically prove that it's the machine, we'll consider fixing it. And so that was the genesis of going, okay, how do we statistically prove that this machine is having this problem? Well, obviously, we started talking to the dealer community, and a lot of Minolta dealers were using lacrosse management systems at the time. So we talked to John Brostrom and Thomas Smith and said, hey, is there a way that we could get data out of your systems, aggregate it, and then use that to draw conclusions from? So it took some heavy duty modification on their side, but essentially they looked at it and said, okay, we'll just treat each dealer as a branch, because they could do multiple branches. And so we modified their software to aggregate the data together, only to find out that even though they're all using the same platform, they're all using it differently. We made the rash assumption that if you're using the same software, you must be using it the same way. And it wasn't true. So we had to come up with all these different methods for changing an apple to an apple, but leaving it an apple in some ways, right? So accommodate the fact that the dealers are using the software differently without changing the outcome. And that was a challenging feat because the software was never designed to do that. So we had to figure out how to get that done. So we started out with, I think, 14 dealers, got the data, put the reporting together, so that we could prove it was the equipment, sent it to Japan. And Japan's response was, well, we see the data looks correct, but we think you're using the wrong calculations. And I said, well, I failed ninth grade algebra, so I'll give you that one. Tell me what the right calculations are supposed to be. So they gave me the math. We incorporated that math, came back, the machine still had an issue, right? So they came back and said, well, it's not your calculations so much as you need more dealers in your sample size. So we only had 14 dealers. So I went out, upped it to 27. Nothing changed. The machine was still showing performance that was way out of what engineering had designed the machine to do. So came back and said, okay, exactly what's wrong now? I've doubled the sample size. So it's not that, it's not the calculation. And they came back and said, well, if you had picked good dealers, the machine would be better. You just picked bad dealers.
Oh, God.
And, I'm not the brightest light bulb in the shed, but boy, that started getting me going. Maybe they don't really want to know the answer to this question, right? So at that time, the dollar yen started having issues, and culturally, they don't like laying off people. And so they have to make this decision. They wanted to lay off people, but didn't really want to because the dollar yen was giving them grief. So after a little convincing, I went to Greg and said, well, why don't we, I think the dealers are getting value out of this. Why don't we just take this private? We can continue with the dealers that we have and see if we can build a business around this. And I said, but, obviously we were leaving at the time what we thought were really exceptionally well-paying jobs at corporate. We both had young families, and, so it was a big risk stepping off the benefits bandwagon and starting over with no income. And so after I convinced Greg, we thought, okay, we'll go to Japan. So we talked to Japanese and we said, look, if we quit, can we have all of this all this work that we've done, all this software development? And they were happy to let us go because it accomplished their ability to lay off people without actually having to lay us off. And they didn't like the answer to the software anyway, so it saved them from having to respond to the demand that we were making on them, that this machine is costing 4 or 5 times what it's supposed to cost the dealer to service. So Greg and I quit, and here we are.
Rest is history. So Lisa, when he told me this, I remember we were in his office downstairs in the Minolta building, and he's going through all this stuff with me, and I'm thinking, they don't want to know this. Nobody wants data like this. And so when he made the decision, or they made the decision to leave Minolta, I think that was one of the best days in the industry, because all these years later, that data is still being used to benefit the industry. So I want to come back to Lisa a little bit now. So Lisa, and when you first saw Wes, here's going to be a fun personal question. Did you just jump head over heels? I love this guy. It was a love at first sight, or did you go? Was it?
It was actually love before first sight. I actually felt this man. So we met on my 28th birthday in a country and western club.
Well,
and I felt this man touch the door. And when he came through the door, that was
it.
She wrote. Yeah.
So where was this bar? Where were you guys? Kansas or?
No, we were in Texas. It was our favorite bar. We both ended up there all the time. And it was a little country and western bar in Grand Prairie, Texas.
Wow. And how long after he touched the door did you guys get married?
We dated for 5 years before we got married.
Wow.
Yep, we got married. The next year, we had our youngest son.
And that would be
Dakota.
We're going to talk about Dakota a little bit.
Yeah.
So when you two first met, at that point, he was still working for Minolta?
Yes, he was. And so he was traveling to New Jersey 4 or sometimes 5 days of the week. He'd leave on a Monday, come back Wednesday or Thursday, and then work, from the house a couple days or whatever. And we'd spend the weekends either water skiing at the lake, or bowling, or pistol shooting, or at the country and western bar.
And by the way, your maiden name is Willoughby, right?
It is.
Which is a phenomenal name, and I got it mixed up with Willoughby. But your name it kind of reminds me of what you do on a daily basis with your safari. So can both of you share a little bit of light on what you do with those your African safari? So
Sure.
Lisa, you first. I know you love it.
Yes, it's my favorite thing in the world to talk about next to talking about Wes. We have a business in Africa, South Africa. It's called TDK Safaris. We've been doing it for 13 years now. Up until COVID, I would go over from about March to about August and stay over there. So, to leave my wonderful husband 6 months of the year, it has to be something incredible. But the first time we went, they drugged me by my hair. I did not want to go. It was too scary, too everything, just too everything. But the minute my feet touched the ground of Africa, my soul went quiet.
Wow.
It is that way every single time I go. It is that way every time I get to share it with one of our clients. So our safari guides hunting and non-hunting safaris. We have our first client for the year coming over in about a week or two, I think. Our youngest son, Dakota, was one of my guides for several years. Well, for about 10 years. And so it was kind of a family thing. And Wes stayed here and he managed BEI and took care of his people while we were over there taking care of Africa. It's an incredible place. We're about 3 hours north of Johannesburg. We have about 32-ish, kind of give or take, huntable species if you're into hunting. If you're not, there's lots of interesting things to do around our area, and we can take you to Kruger or Zimbabwe or Cape Town, do a wine tour. Or, we pretty much tailor to whatever the people want.
And by the way, everybody in the audience, we'll make sure that you have the information to be able to reach out to Lisa and Wes for the safaris. And we'll get the link in and the links and all of that. So, because it's a beautiful place. I've seen it in video, and it's incredible. It's incredible. So to come back to Wes. So Wes now leaves. You guys get married. Dakota is born. You're creating a business, Wes. And at some point, did you say to yourself, I think I made a mistake? Or did you ever look back?
No, there were plenty of moments where I went, what have I done? Because, it's like all of the things that make marriage challenging, money and all of those kind of things. I poured it on us all at one time. We just gotten married. We just had our first son. We just moved from Texas to Pennsylvania with no income, no insurance.
Wow.
This woman was amazing. She learned how to, you get the new credit card with 0 interest and you pay off the other one with it. The credit card's so good. If she hadn't done that, we'd have starved. She would go to those are the days we'd go to the grocery store with a calculator and add up everything that we put in the cart to make sure we could afford it when we checked out.
Yeah.
So you are truly the American dream.
Yeah, we were broke. We had no idea how broke you could be until then.
It's so when we were talking the other night, I'm kind of bouncing around here a little bit. I want to get back to business, and I don't want to embarrass you, Wes, but I think everybody in the industry thinks you are absolutely incredible, right? Just a real warrior. And when I heard Lisa said to me something that kind of resonates with me. She's never seen you run from a challenge, right? And so, Lisa, I think it's safe to say that spirit and that attitude has taken you both through a very tough year.
Absolutely.
So, and the flip side of that is, Wes always says, obviously he couldn't make it without you. And a caregiver, I think you call it, right, Wes?
Yep.
caregiver. So to all the caregivers out there, people who are struggling, look at these two and remember you can do it, right? You can get it done. So I'm proud of you. The industry's proud of you. And obviously we're looking forward to another great year. Hopefully the next 6 months you'll be in Africa enjoying every part of that. So when you come back now to the business and you look at what's going on in the business, how long did you have the business? You moved from BEI to Nextera. How long was it in existence?
We started the business in August of '93.
Okay. So, and then you sold it in 23?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, 23. So I give you guys a lot of credit for actually improving the quality of the business and the way it operates from OEM all the way down. Do you realize just the impact, the serious impact, positive impact you've had on our industry over the course of those last 30 some years?
Well, from a personal perspective, that wasn't part of why I was doing what I was doing. I was, when you start a business, I think at the early stages, I was just hoping I could make enough money to pay the bills. I wasn't looking at it getting rich or having an impact or a legacy or anything else. It was just about putting food on the table. And so I never really considered the impact what we were doing had, because every decision was a little short term in comparison. We were like, what do we have to do to get one more customer so we can afford to pay the bills next month?
So during all this time and you're growing the business, who, if I could ask you this, who were your greatest mentors? Who did you look to help grow the business, gut check what you were doing? Who comes to mind when I ask that question?
Well, my dad, obviously the first one, he owned multiple grocery stores and sporting goods stores, and so he was an entrepreneur type too. So, I would constantly ask him, because while he didn't start from scratch the way I did, he was managing a store, and the owner decided to retire, and so he was already the manager. The bank was happy to loan him the money to buy the store because he'd been there for 20 years managing it. So he knew the business and he knew how to run the store. So, but he parlayed that one store into 9 other grocery stores and 5 other sporting goods stores. So, he obviously knew what he was doing. So I went to him quite a bit in those early years trying to understand what I was supposed to do, because I didn't go to college. So I didn't have, when they said I needed a business plan, I go, what's that? So I run down to Barnes and Noble and bought a book on writing a business plan. I didn't know what one was, so I had to figure it out. So when you start going to people going, look, this is what I want to do, every person that we talked to about loaning us money thought we were nuts. They thought there's no way anybody's going to pay you to do this.
Wow.
And back then, nothing was automated like it is. So we
Yeah.
were sending out stacks of paper. Every report was on a paper.
Yeah, the internet wasn't where it was at today. So, like Lisa said, we would take lacrosse management systems, and they already had a series of service reports. We just had to modify them to get them where we wanted. And we literally print out an 1.5-inch thick stack of paper. We had an EP 5400 in the basement of Greg's house. We'd make a copy of it, stick the original in the box, ship it to the customer, and whenever they called for support, we'd have to find that report. They'd get their report, and we'd have the 2 pieces of paper, and we'd be comparing notes over the phone.
Wow. Can you imagine that? I mean, looking at what we're doing today, I mean, Jesus.
No.
So what was the big breakthrough? Was there one account, or was there a month? What was there anything special that happened that made you go, okay, we're good, we're on our way?
The struggle is that we started out, all we had was Minolta data, because we just started out with the 12 original Minolta dealers that we had while we were at Minolta. And it's hard to compare Canon data to Minolta, so we had to go out and get other manufacturers' data into the database in order to be relevant. And we were struggling with that because we're trying to convince a Canon dealer to sign on, but we didn't have any Canon data. So I couldn't show him what it looked like with his information. So I came from the technical world, so I was a technician for many years. So I kind of lived in that fix-it world. And one of the challenges was that I never felt like technicians kind of got their due, because when you're working on 50 or 60 different models of equipment and you've got to keep in your head all the differences in all those different models to troubleshoot and fix it, I thought that's a very complicated job. But technicians kind of still get treated like they're the backroom guys in the coveralls, and you bring them out when you have an open house. The rest of the time they're stuck in the back room and never get to leave. In our case at Minolta, we were stuck in the basement. So, but same philosophy. So I thought, is there a way that we can recognize technicians for what they do? And so I started coming up, working an idea of a compensation model that took in what is the behavior that we want the techs to do. We want them to fix it right the first time, as many times as possible in an 8-hour period. And how can I incent that behavior financially that doesn't break the bank for the dealer, but rewards the technician for doing what I need him to do? So I started using the data set that I had to model this idea and say, can it be done? Is there data there that would help facilitate that idea? So at the time I was using Lotus 123 because that was the major spreadsheet that was available for the early versions of, it wasn't really Windows, but MS-DOS. And I ran into an issue. Lotus 123 only allowed 256 characters in a formula. So as you're writing formulas, and some of the formulas I had in TechComp exceeded that. So it actually broke Lotus 123 and it wouldn't work. So I had to switch to Excel.
So, and Lisa, are you working with Wes at that time?
I'm sorry?
Were you working with Wes at that time? Were you helping out?
I was helping out a little bit here and there. And in your original question was there any customer or anything that kind of broke over the edge? And I guess my recollection is that every single customer that he brought on was a nugget of gold.
Hmm.
But Icon, when we landed Icon, that was really a major breakthrough.
Wow.
Is the way I remember it.
Yeah. Well, I do remember when that was announced. That was a big event in the industry. Now that you mention it, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So when you both look back, and obviously you started out young and aggressive and go get them, and you took a lot of risk, and then you fast forward to where you are today. So you sell the company, and clearly the journey for you has been all over the place, from having credit card food and all the sacrifices you made. So Lisa, when you look back, that has to put a real strain on a mom and a businesswoman, trying to raise Dakota and grow a family and all. So what are the things that you remember the most about this journey, and how do you feel about how Wes tackled those things?
I think my overall feeling on it is that this man was undaunted. Every single obstacle that came up in front of us with BEI, he just went for head on. And we had such a phenomenal group of people in our company that worked for us. They were an extension in our hearts. They were an extension of our family. And while we didn't always do it perfect, he always did his best to treat them like family. So that was what struck me the most was the feeling that he put. It wasn't just like working for Tom, Dick, or Harry. It was, come into the fold, come into my family, and I'll do my best to be a good leader. And none of us are perfect, so we don't do it right all the time, but he truly did do his best. And just every obstacle that came in front of him, he just went for, and he figured out a way to get around it or to get through it or to go over it or just to make it better. And here we are 30 years later, and it was a huge struggle making that decision to sell the company. It's like, raising your child and then in
Yeah.
their adult years giving them up for adoption. It was horrible.
Well, that had to be bittersweet, right?
It absolutely was.
Yeah, bittersweet. But and again, I hope you don't mind my sharing this with the audience. But I think you would agree with me, Lisa. Wes is probably a little bit more stoic, but are you surprised by the people that come in and out of your life at certain times?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I think I could speak to you and me. I think you and I really didn't know each other all that well, other than maybe remotely, until you and I spent the day in the hospital,
Yep.
right?
That's absolutely true.
So, for the people in the audience, this woman she's a firecracker. I mean, when she got a little agitated about what they were doing, I sat there and I was like, okay, something's going to happen here real quick. And I saw Lisa get on fire and she kicked some butts, and all of a sudden things were happening. So I think that was probably one of my most meaningful days of my life, which I appreciate. You showed me a lot. And
Well,
Wes, I'm sorry, Lisa, you wanted to say something?
I was just going to say it was for me too, because we had no idea the people that would come in from nowhere. And that was a support on a day that you gave me that was absolutely critical. And it meant the world to me.
Me too. So Wes, back to Dakota. So and Lisa. So we had the privilege of having two Dakotas at our ECS dinner. And I still laugh about it. I mean, I'm an Italian kid from Chicago. I don't know any Dakotas. And all of a sudden I know two, and we're having that dinner and the award for you. How did you feel about, having that moment, in front of the industry, receiving that beautiful certification and award? How did you feel about all that?
Very humbled, very appreciative. I've always seen myself as somewhat invisible because as a technician, you're not like the sales guys. You don't drive the fancy cars or go on the fancy trips. We just plug away at our jobs and go drive our Pintos with our toolbox in the back, and and
Pinto?
well, it's all you could afford. That's what you drove. So, it was almost uncomfortable at times because as a technician, there was never an opportunity where a technician was, would receive that kind of recognition or that kind of attention. So I wasn't quite prepared for it, but it was very, very special.
And it was amazing to get to share it with Dakota. We wished our older son could have been there as well, Josh, but we were grateful that Dakota could take time off of his police patrol and be there.
Oh my God. I remember people were coming up to me and saying, did we do something wrong? The police are here. No, we're fine. Well, you know what? You deserved it. And it's a wonderful thing to see that you still carry that humility of a technician, way back from the day, carrying a toolbox and doing the things that you do. And, so I'm kind of proud of the fact that you carry that humility well. And we had an opportunity as an industry to recognize all of the things that you've achieved in your life. So when you go a little bit further down the road, so the two of you are going back to Africa pretty soon here, right? You're going to spend a bit of time there.
Yep.
So from both of you, actually, your perspectives about the business, about life, what message do you give to all of us, listening to you and watching your career and watching your life now? What message do you give really to the industry and to us as people? So, Wes, I'll ask you that question first.
Well, I think we hear it all the time. We just don't necessarily take it to heart. Is that life is short, and you've got to cherish the moments you have, because boy, it doesn't take but a split second and they're gone. And plan and prepare for the future. So, when I got diagnosed, all of a sudden, not only was Lisa put in a role of caregiver, but she was forced to take over the role of taking care of everything that I took care of. I think in most marriages, there's a certain division of responsibilities that happens just out of efficiency, and skill set. And so all of the things that I was taking care of while she was in Africa, she now had to step in and start taking care of for me, because I simply wasn't capable. And that is you have no idea how huge an undertaking that really is. I mean, just think of how many websites that you have a password for.
Good point.
Right. And so I would encourage everybody to look at a password manager. I use a product called Dashlane, and it records all your passwords. It generates passwords. But with one master password, Lisa can get in and see the password to every website I've ever been to in the last 20 years.
Not that I know what they're all for.
Yeah.
Well, that's very practical. I mean, you talked about some very philosophical things, but that's a very practical thing.
Yes.
Where are the passwords and all of that? So that's good advice. And as people, just philosophically, given your past 30, 40 years, what do they need to think about as being leaders and or warriors of business? What do you recommend they do?
Don't forget the people that back you, and don't forget to treat your employees with grace and kindness and respect as much as you can, because they're what sustain you and what builds your business.
So, Lisa, do you think leaders are born or made?
I think they can be both. I think he was a born leader, but he made himself a leader. I mean, I think you have to have the innate ability to be a leader, and the brain, the intelligence to carry it out.
Well, he said he went to Barnes and Noble.
He did. Yes.
What do you think, Wes? Are leaders born or made?
I agree with Lisa. I think there's a certain DNA component to being a leader that makes you want to be one, but there's a skill set that you have to learn. So I kind of liken it to some of the virtuosos. They're little kids that can sit down and play a piano with no lessons. They just have that innate ability, but they still have to practice to hone the skill.
So when you to have a little bit of, I ask everybody this question. I think I warned you about it, so I'm not sure if you guys actually have a song, but I want to come back to Sinatra. So I've told you I'm just an Italian kid from Chicago, and I grew up on Sinatra, and I love music. Do you have a favorite Sinatra song?
A favorite Sinatra song? All of them?
No, just one. Just one.
Not that I could come up with the title at the moment.
How about you, Wes? You got one?
Not really, because like Lisa said, we
They're
met
all
each other
good.
and grew up on country music. So,
But
Well, I'm gonna assign one to you.
okay.
So, for the record, for the audience, I think "That's Life" is a great Sinatra song for you too, especially at this point in your life.
Yeah.
Now, given that I'm not really all that good on country music, what is your favorite country song?
well, we danced a lot to Clint Black and
Yeah.
Clint Black?
Yeah. Garth.
All right. All right. So I'm not going to put any more pressure on you, but I do think that the audience probably wants to hear a little bit of your view, Wes, of what you think the business is going to look like, for the next 2-3 years. Do you have do you have a kind of crystal ball where you could say, I think it's going this way?
Well, I think I feel really kind of disconnected because I've been, trapped at home and not really involved in the same way that I used to be. So I feel a little disconnected from what's been going on, but I still believe that AI is going to change everything in every business and in every aspect of the business at some level, and people better understand it and figure out where they fit within the context of what AI is going to do to change it, or they will get changed out.
So, Lisa, I want to come back to what you said too. You mentioned the importance of being graceful or loyal or trustworthy or respectful, and I think those things probably have more importance than ever before.
Yep.
And so, I want to just emphasize for the audience that I'm 100% with you. The world could use a whole lot more of that and a whole lot more kindness. And certainly appreciation. So before we leave, is there anything else that I've missed that you might want to share? And Lisa, I'll start with you.
Just that we are so grateful and so thankful for everyone in the industry that has taken time to send him messages, cards, the way you have honored him in the past year. It touches our hearts. You don't know everyone that you've reached out and touched or made a difference to until you're kind of face planted on the dirt, and then people come out and support you, and that is so heart touching. And so we are so grateful and so appreciative for everyone that has reached out.
So I'm going to dust the cobwebs off of a memory that just came to me in response to the question about what were the key pivotal moments. So I mentioned I got this TechComp program done. The first person that bought it was Pete Brown at Delta down in Florida.
Wow.
And fortunately, they were a multi-line dealer. So when I got their data, now all of a sudden I have data from something other than Minolta. And so as the program started to have success for Pete, then he started talking to Cedric Trice up at Complete in North Carolina. And of course, these were, for that day, were the mega dealers. They were the big guns because they had multiple branches, 100 technicians. And he was multi-line also. So that added more data for these other product lines that I did not have data for. So those two moments kind of changed the trajectory for us, because now all of a sudden I had data on Savin, I had data on Canon, I had data on Sharp that I did not have before. So when I went to another dealer, I could show them, here's the rest of the world on the same products that you service. So it added a lot more validity to the sales pitch.
And that's why you went from service technician to sales guy. And by the way, I've noticed you got a nice car too. I love the Torino. So listen, both of you, I know I've talked to hundreds of people about you, about your career, about your life. You've inspired people. You can't even imagine how you've inspired them, both of you. And so if I can speak on behalf of the industry for a moment, you're highly respected, appreciated, and certainly loved. So I think the message for this podcast for everyone: don't ever give up, keep fighting, attack every challenge, work together. You two are a beautiful couple, and I love you both.
Thank you so much.
So with that, we're going to say thank you and take it away.
Thank you.
Thank you.